Hello, welcome back. This is Xanthus with Xanthus Gaming. We're in Diablo 3 and we're going to go over a guide for the Pestilence Masters build. In the top left corner you'll notice that there is gameplay going on for a GRift 70 clear that I did. If you're not familiar with what the set is, 2-piece gives us a corpse lance fired at a random target whenever we consume a corpse. 4-piece gives us a 2% damage reduction up to a 50% whenever we hit with a bone spear. So once we hit a few targets, we have a permanent 50% damage reduction up and running. That's fantastic. The 6-piece set is each corpse you consume grants you an empowered bone spear charge that increases the damage of your next bone spear by 3000%. This is where most of our damage comes from. In addition to that, we're running Traveler's Pledge for a damage reduction and a damage increase. This allows us to move between packs more easily without getting globally killed, and also allows us to burst down elites and Rift Guardians a lot more easily. Our bracers we're using are the Reaper's Wraps, which makes it so health globes restore primary resources. This is actually really important for this build since we're not using a generator. This will help smooth out all the issues that we might have. We're also using a Crispin Sentence, which will give us up to 100% damage increase on slowed targets and triple that against stunned, blinded, frozen, any other type of CC targets. It's really, really powerful. Our belt is called Dainty's Binding, which makes it so whenever you have any single enemy afflicted with Decrepify, you take 50% damage reduction from all enemies. This is super important, and you cannot forget to apply your Decrepify if you're running this build. It becomes vitally important to not only your survival, but also your damage. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. We are using Scythe of the Cycle as our weapon. It makes it so that your secondary skills can deal up to 300% increased damage. This one rolled very poorly, but it's ancient, so we're using it. Whatever. Anyway, that 300% damage increase on your bone spear is also going to stack with your 3000% increase of your set, so it's pretty darn powerful. The offhand we're using is a Lost Time. We're actually just using it as a stat stick. You could also use a lidless wall with a poison modifier on it. I did try having the Maltorius's Petrified Spike in my hand and then just the Scythe Cycle in the cube, and I actually found I had much better results with the offhand for the stat stick than I did the other way around. It also allows you to spam those bone spears a little bit quicker when you're in your frozen and stun damage windows for your Crispin Sentence. In addition to that, in the cube, we have a Maltorius's Spike, which gives it a 450% increase in damage on your bone spear at the cost of 40 essence. Now we're going to offset the cost of that 40 essence with our next item in our cube and with our Devour. Requiem is making it so that whenever we devour, we get 100% additional essence and life, which is pretty crazy. So we double the 10 essence and 3% health up to 20 essence and 6% health for every corpse we consume. That's pretty crazy. And if we are at max on essence or max on health, it will grant that over 3 seconds. And it will actually stack too. So if you consume like 6 corpses while you're at max, you'll get 6 stacks of that stuff over time instead. It really smooths out the gameplay. And for the ring, we are using Unity. For gems, we have Azay's Stone of Vengeance, which makes it so the damage you deal is increased by 10% for every 10 yards between you and the enemy, up to 50%. This is a very significant source of damage, and as such it is important for you to be as far as you reasonably can be away from the targets when you're casting your bone spear. Don't kill yourself to do that, but it's pretty important to try to get some distance. In addition, you have a 20% chance to stun enemies for 1 second, which will also proc our Crispin Sentence. Our Compass Rose has a Bane of the Powerful in it, which gives us 20% increased damage for 100 seconds after killing an elite pack at level 70. This is just basically a flat 20% increase in damage all the time. And then when you fight elites, you do an additional 15% damage against elites and take 15% less. So essentially you're doing 35% increased damage against elites and taking 15% less damage against elites. Pretty good. And then with the Bane of the Trapped, it's a multiplicative damage modifier. Everyone knows how good this is. Mine's ranked 91. I've seen ones higher, of course, but it gives you increased damage against any crowd-controlled enemies. And we'll be crowd-controlling enemies constantly with our curse, so we'll always have this bonus. Let's move on to the skills, and when we do that, we're going to move the gameplay video to the bottom right of the screen. There we go. Oh, it started over. Darn it. Oh well. Well, you guys will get to see all of it in its entirety in just a little bit here. So, for our skills, we have Bone Armor, Dislocation, which provides a stun to enemies around us whenever we activate our Bone Armor, and a 3% damage reduction per enemy hit, stacking up to 10 times, so you can get up to a 30% damage reduction. As you reapply the Bone Armor, it keeps increasing the stacks rather than starting over. Our secondary is Bone Spear with Blighted Marrow, which is a 500% weapon damage skill that is increased by 15% per enemy you pass through. This makes it very important to position so that your elite is the last thing that you hit as often as possible with your Bone Spear. Our Blood Rush, which is our next ability, helps us do this more easily, kiting and rounding enemies up in just the right way and then teleporting through them or repositioning with the teleport. Speaking of which, Blood Rush is our next ability, which lets us reposition for maximum damage with our Bone Spear, and also allows us to get out of nasty affixes and move more easily between packs. The rune that we're using on this is Molting to provide us with a constant supply of corpses to consume with our Devour. This becomes particularly important versus the Rift Guardian, as you'll see, because even with Land of the Dead, you cannot nuke it down instantly because we're not using Bane of the Stricken, and as such, you need a way to get more corpses as often as possible. Decrepify with the rune of Borrowed Time gives us a 30% damage reduction from any enemies afflicted by Decrepify, and will also slow their movement speed by 75%, allowing you to group them up and wrangle them up a little bit easier. In addition, the rune that we chose gives us a 1% cooldown reduction for every enemy that is cursed. Now, it should be noted that that damage or that cooldown reduction does not apply dynamically. So if you hit your Land of the Dead and then you apply the curse, you're not getting any cooldown reduction from Decrepify. You have to make sure your curse is on the targets before you hit your Land of the Dead. But if you were to get 20 targets cursed and then hit Land of the Dead, that would be a 24-second cooldown reduction off of your Land of the Dead. Pretty crazy. Our Devour rune we're using is Cannibalize, which allows us to get 3% health back in addition to the 10 essence we get back. Because we're using the Requiem Seraplate, it's actually 20 essence per corpse we consume and 6% health, which is pretty crazy powerful. Our Land of the Dead is a 120-second cooldown, which can be reduced by up to 24 seconds with Decrepify, and it will freeze everything on the screen for 10 seconds. This gives us not only tons of survivability, but also gives us a triple damage proc for our Crisp and Sentence Ring, and we can use corpse skills at will, and since we're going to use the Numlock trick on Cannibalize, we have basically infinite essence when Land of the Dead is up, and we'll be spawning tons and tons of health globes because our passive is Life from Death, which makes it so consuming a corpse has a 20% chance to spawn a health globe. You'll see moments where there are just like 20 or 30 health globes on the screen, and that's because of this combined with Land from Dead and auto-casted Devour. Our next passive is Spreading Malediction, which increases damage by 1% for each enemy afflicted by one of your curses. This is just a straight up damage increase, and we want to be cursing as many enemies as possible for the Crispin's proc, for the Bane of Trap proc, and for the cooldown reduction from Decrepify. Blood is Power will give us a 20% cooldown on all of our cooldown abilities whenever we lose 100% life, which you'll do. It doesn't mean 100% all at once, it's 100% over time. And that will take off a good chunk of cooldown off of Land of the Dead. It's actually going to take off the same amount as Decrepify's Borrowed Time does, so it's 24 seconds. Which means we can take up to 48 seconds cooldown off of Land of the Dead, which actually takes it from 120 second cooldown down to a 76 second cooldown, which is pretty significant. Our last passive is Standalone. which increases our armor by 100%, but reduces it by 10% for every active minion. Since we don't have any active minions, we are essentially just increasing our armor by 100%, which is pretty darn good. Alrighty, so that's the build. We're going to go ahead and let you watch the gameplay video as we finish this out. It should be noted that as you're playing, you want to have your cannibalize using the numlock trick. If you don't know how to do that, you make sure your numlock is bound to a number pad key. I'm sorry, your your skill that Devour is on is bound to a number pad key. And then you make sure your numlock is on. You hit and hold down that key that is your Devour, and then you turn off numlock and release the key, and it will automatically cast it forever, instantly, all the time. Alright, go ahead and enjoy the gameplay footage, and then we'll talk a little bit more at the very end. Okay, so as you can see, we cleared a Greater Rift 75 pretty easily. We had about 5 minutes left over, and it wasn't that big of a deal. Now, I'll go ahead and show you the pieces of gear that I'm using, so you know I'm not decked out in all Ancients with Caldicarian's Despairs. My gear is actually kind of modest. I have one Ancient set piece, an Ancient Traveler's Pledge, and an Ancient weapon, and that's it. Here's my Ancient set piece, my Ancient weapon, and my Ancient Traveler's Pledge set. And everything else is just standard non-ancient. Did reroll. I think that area damage is pretty important. Cooldown reduction is very important. Obviously crit hit chance, crit hit damage is pretty important. I actually think area damage is probably more important than crit hit chance. But ideally you want both on as many pieces as you can get. I do have about 917,000 toughness or health. Could probably sacrifice a little bit of vitality for some more crit damage or something along those lines. My stats are 35% crit hit chance, 364% crit hit damage, and 111% area damage. So, hope you guys enjoyed the video, hope you enjoyed the build. If you did, make sure you leave a like. If you didn't, that's cool too. Leave a comment, let us know what you thought we should do differently. And either way, I want to say thank you guys so much for spending some time with us today. I hope you did enjoy the video, and I will say see you guys later. Until next time, bye YouTubes.